Donald Trump was never very popular, so
Sure.
he almost never had an approval rating over 50%. So given his approval rating, one would not have expected him to win re-election because it was usually in the high 30s or low 40s. This is not an approval rating that generally gets re-elected. Also, Trump energized his opponents even more than he energized his supporters. So you saw a very substantial increase in turnout in 2018, and you saw it primarily in the suburbs. So what happened was in the key states and in all the other states, there was approximately a 2% suburban turnout away from Trump and towards the Democratic candidate. And that essentially decided the election. Donald Trump, for all his virtues, and I was, incredibly thrilled by a lot of the things that he did. He's never shown that he's particularly good at running things. He was not good at running things in business. He would have been far richer if he'd simply invested the funds in the most ordinary treasure. Much in the Democrats' interest to make voting as easy as possible, just as it's very much in Republican interest to make voting as difficult as possible. Now, Republicans can't come out and say we want to suppress the vote, but it's in Republican interest to move the voter turnout down a little bit, just as it's in the Democrats' interest to move the voter turnout up a little bit. If voter turnout keeps going up, a lot more black people and Latinos and low information voters are going to vote, and they're overwhelmingly going to vote for the Democrats. Because it's not socially acceptable to say that you're for suppressing the vote, Republicans use this rhetoric of voter fraud. And it's been a big deal since the Motor Voter Registration Act passed by Bill Clinton circa 1993, and Republicans have placed enormous rhetorical effort into making the case for massive amounts of voter fraud. They have all these talking heads, and they're just so pathetic. I mean, look, I understand rhetoric, and I understand if you can just diminish the minority vote, 2%, that you increase the odds of Republicans winning certain seats. But I'm not going to buy your rhetoric. Republican presidents from Trump to George W. Bush to Ronald Reagan put all sorts of federal attorneys into place to pursue voter fraud, and they can never come up with more than a handful of cases. Hans von Popovsky, the Heritage Center's voter fraud expert, is able to come up with about 1,300 cases of voter fraud over the past 40 years. So over the past 40 years, we've had over 1 billion votes counted, and he can come up with documented cases of about 1,300. So Republicans were always screaming about voter fraud. President Trump was always screaming about voter fraud. They've never been able to assemble the evidence. There's absolutely no price paid for crying and yelling and screaming about voter fraud, but people aren't coming up with the evidence. It's absolutely